The world is a matrix of perspectives, where each one is as unverifiable as the next, and there is no meaning besides that which we think to be there. Thus, no kind of logic or axiom is possible without a set of underlying assumptions. It's rather straightforward. A equals A, but add B to the equation and you get A equals B equals A, which is a circular argument that is nonetheless valid. As a matter of fact, all logic is circular in nature. Were it not so, the law of conservation of energy would have to be violated, which simply cannot be, as it would be like trying to disprove logic using sad logic in the first place. Simply put, logic is a principle by which things become equal, and that is the reason it is so infallibly consistent. It explains how nature works and could be even said to be the very language behind the laws of physics. We, of course, being in many ways a product of those laws, are contained within a set of rules that also keeps this unimaginably complex machine called the world running. But there is a catch. Due to the uncertainty principle, nothing can be really proven or disproven for that matter. Almost everything we know is in constant flux between opposites, but never quite fully there. With that in mind, it is by no means a coincidence that the way we think, even before putting thoughts into words, is logical. Now, even though different words and labels mean different things to people, no matter the language, at the very core, we are all the same way. This is an inescapable consequence of being able to communicate, and vice versa, that you understand the meaning behind mine, or anybody's words for that matter. At the very core is the result of us exchanging something that we can all register unconditionally. Imagine a wave in the ocean and a wave in a lake in some remote place. They do not know of one another's existence, right? But what if the waves were both in the same medium? What if they meet and exchange some of the energy? Both would be changed depending on the way they interacted. Ultimately, all interactions in all of being are about energy exchange and its transformations. They are about energy in motion, and as I've said previously, energy moves in circles. The only difference is the sizes of those circles and how many smaller circles are contained within. As a matter of fact, you can get any pattern that way. You see, energy fundamentally is information, where a string describes energy dynamics at a scale so small we have almost no hope of proving it through observation. Gladly though we don't need to, as direct personal experience is already a proof in itself. Because what do you think empiricism is about after all? You most likely experience colors and smells on a daily basis, but try to explain, let alone prove their existence to someone who's never had such sensations before. You'll soon find it's utterly impossible, no matter in what accurate a detail you do it. With string theory it's the other way around. All the math is there, and it successfully addresses the issue of combining quantum mechanics and general relativity, the two main pillars of modern science, but there is a problem. No one knows what it really means, or at least they think they don't. A lot in science is open to interpretation, and not all of the assumptions it is built upon are clear. And this is where I draw the line, as I do not mean to say that this or that particular approach to thinking and understanding at large is better than the other, that frivolous philosophy maybe is better than exact sciences or the other way round. Quite the contrary. I suggest combining everything perceived both externally and internally within a framework where information plays the main role. You might be asking, what is information anyway? Information is essentially what we're used to call meaning. It is what we see it as. It is all about perspective, so then understanding is a matter of finding balance between opposites. By combining seemingly incompatible opposites, we find how they overlap, and in doing so elevate ourselves above, as if by zooming out to see the whole picture. It feels good to comprehend because extra cognitive load is removed and the weight is lifted. When the B in the logical chain is removed, the process becomes more optimized and the energy flows from A back into itself freely. Just as we can deconstruct things into smaller parts, we can track back and deduce big ones in the opposite order. This holds two key points needed to understand the world. Everything is connected and everything is interchangeable. As above, so below, they say, and it is true, except our short attention spans keep us from seeing it, and thus walking in circles time and time again. Verily, time is the illusion separating beginnings from the endings. Try asking not if the world is finite, but instead how the infinite could have been reduced to the finite. In a question like this, there is no conceivable way to reach an exhaustive conclusion, and therefore there never was finitude to start with. Everything is in constant motion due to the sheer impossibility of it ever being able to stop and become perfectly determined. The process is infinite. It is a given. The present moment is infinite in the same way any unit of length can be divided an infinite number of times. But that doesn't keep us from using the measuring tape, does it? This perfectly illustrates why we like to read into everything so much. Consider the notion of nothingness. Does it not already contain every possibility there is? Out of an infinitely small point, simply by giving it direction to move in, we simultaneously get a line and a dimension where there was nothing to start with. As a matter of fact, there is nothing still, as it's not the point moving, but our perspective. For all intents and purposes, nothing had been created or destroyed, but we've ended up with an object anyway. How else would that be possible had the object not been there all along? And the answer is simple. It is a fractal, without an end or beginning, but I'll get back to that a little later. Upon close inspection, information and fractals share about every quality and are indistinguishable from one another. So, what is information again then? Since labels are deceptive, let us identify this abstract notion by its qualities instead. Information is causal and self-referential. Meaningful information has patterns in it, is low in entropy and is resistant to change, though when pressure to change is applied, it happens simultaneously across the entire thing. All information is connected in that it can be tracked back to the source, but never to the beginning, because, as I've said previously, there is no such thing as finitude or perfect certainty, only temporal locality. Information can't be created or destroyed, only rearranged. It is dynamic, infinitely complex structure without an outside, meaning it contains everything imaginable. A string is essentially a description of the way energy moves. It is what it does. Every object is basically a pattern of movement. Objects exist and we register them as such precisely because they are happening. They are a repeating process, and what does a string do? It vibrates. The entire world is made of things that have a frequency, some complex, others not so much. It all depends on the amount of information contained in an area of space. Let us get back to fractals for a moment. This is a Sierpinski triangle, a very basic fractal with a dimension of roughly 1.5. A simple object that if we were to randomly compare to a string or a sine wave, it would be very similar in the way it oscillates, from one state back to another, and thus in a circle. Now I have to ask, how many times in life have you done that? Have you not questioned life fruitlessly coming back to where you started at best? Got lost in interpersonal relationships maybe? Why must everything in the universe be so unnaturally complex and hard to figure out as to either drive those attempting it to get lost senseless, or discourage any inquiry in favor of the somewhat boring but familiar? Doesn't it seem almost intentional that any time you tried getting out of the circle and the repeating pattern, something just had to get in the way?
Boromir.
It is a strange fate that we should suffer so much fear and doubt over so small a thing.
Are you even aware when you are walking in circles, and I should ask, what kind of legs are you walking with specifically? It is your mind and the attention. It is you, always was. Do you have personal freedom? What is freedom if not the availability of places to be, or in other words, your degrees of freedom? Recognize where you could be instead of now, because that is all that matters. It's all in the mind, and the mind is made of information. An infinite recursion whose contents aren't perfectly definable, a non-deterministic and self-adjusting process that is aware of itself by the virtue of self-interference. Whenever you're self-reflecting or caught up in thoughts, you are observing and dealing with patterns within yourself. An act of observation is an act of interaction, and that is where the line between you and another becomes rather blurry. In spite of having no intellectual comprehension of how to function, you're still naturally able to do it because you can feel the things happening to you. You can feel drained, energized, and a whole range of emotions because none of it is external. It is all within. There is no outside. Every kind of separation is only due to your attention not containing all of being at the same time. You don't contain everything at the same time, but you are an inseparable part of it regardless. And I'm not just talking about the universe, which is but a construct with unchanging laws and limits that didn't have to be exactly the way they are. Everything is relative and therefore everything is possible. Probabilities add up, and the greater they are, the more charge is there to deal with. That is how all systems are formed. There is a well-known effect in quantum mechanics where an elementary particle has a very small chance to tunnel through an otherwise impenetrable border. Statistically, the chance is so small it is negligible, but it is still there, and that is important to remember. Once you understand one side of a principle, also consider the opposite to comprehend the system it is a part of. Symmetry of logic is always there. To comprehend, you've got to extrapolate from the outcome, not try to predict and dig deeper, all the while staying at a consistent level of magnification. Now that you have an idea about how all of this works, it is time to get to the core of this video, which is how quantum mechanics describes why we are inclined to act the way we do, building upon the uncertainty principle, in no particular chronological order. That which we regard as a person is a unity of things that have an influence on him, be it the body, the brain, the information saved in the subconscious, or even the emotions, all relative to one another without a single control center, or so it would appear. Since nothing can be perfectly certain, so there can be no perfect determinism, and that is why we have free will to choose. To easier understand the concept, think of yourself as both the whole and the segregate, a self-contained cell in the body of all existence, as well as all existence itself. If change is made to the whole, every part of it also may react, and vice versa, recursively. Was there ever a time you personally were completely sure of anything except that you are indeed yourself? As an example, if you move a glass of water on the table, practically, the entire world is rearranged. If a glass is moved by someone else and you now register it in a different place, in a way, your world is also rearranged. This is not a matter of who does it, but rather that it is done, due to the cause and effect. One may as well say it was done by the universe, but was this planned all along? When we think of determinism, or think at all for that matter, we are doing it retrospectively, and thus every event that happened will seem to have been sure to happen all along. But the issue is that we may never know what's going to happen in the far future exactly, as it gets exponentially more and more difficult to make estimates the further ahead you're trying to look. Not only that, but your vision influences the outcome as well. Some see it as a problem and become deliberate contrarians, others just go with the flow. This is not something people are largely aware of, mind you. The ability to self-reflect without getting lost in thought and consequently becoming unaware of what's going on around is not that common. How do you not get lost, one may ask? Which is also simple. You zoom out of whatever it is your thoughts are preoccupied with by staying in the now, the ultimately self-evident and ultimately undefinable now.